So you decided to skip the Esports World Cup, but still want to know what happened and still want to know the results and everything. I got you covered. Just be sure to do me a favor, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 5,000 by the end of the year, and hopefully we can hit it. In the case that you decided to keep your morals intact and not watch the Esports World Cup, or you legitimately had no clue that it was going to happen, which yes, actually was a thing for many people. I actually saw quite a few that legitimately had no clue that the tournament was ongoing. It really goes to show that whenever you talk about the controversy and stuff on social media, it's not going to reach the general public. Some people legitimately just didn't know that this was a thing despite all the marketing push that you saw from them, at least in terms of the discussion online. Regardless, the LCS sent 2 teams, and they were the same 2 teams that we sent to MSI back in spring, FlyQuest and Team Liquid. FlyQuest, if you remember correctly, bombed out of MSI really badly, losing to PSG, not looking all that great in general. They replaced their mid laner Jensen for Quad. No, that was right. Jesus, I need to stop doubting myself. And Team Liquid, your champions, remained intact, looked pretty good at MSI, a step up from what we saw from them in Worlds. And both teams would go on to a single elimination best of 3 tournament until finals, which would be best of 5, but spoiler alert, none of our teams made it to finals. Not all that shocking, but the result of this actually was pretty good. Instead of doing the best teams versus the worst teams in the first round, they wanted to make it entertaining, so they put G2 versus FlyQuest and Team Liquid versus Fnatic. The West versus the West, and then the East versus the East. Starting with the first matchup, Team Liquid versus Fnatic. Team Liquid was a favorite coming into this series, regardless of how much practice teams got. I saw a lot of discussion of should this tournament be counted as legitimate? We'll discuss all that later. For the purposes of this actually being counted for Europe versus North America, you're damn right it counts, because we beat Fnatic's ass bad. They stood no chance in this series. 2-0, wasn't even close, other than Team Liquid literally experimenting and limit testing in game 2, of which they still won that game. TL looked amazing the entire time. Impact had a phenomenal series. APA and Yawn looked incredible. APA made Humanoid, who has not looked like the best mid laner in Europe, despite his name and reputation kind of still being that. He made him look like shit. And then Yawn and Core JJ just put on a masterclass in the bot lane. It wasn't even close. So, for the second time in a row, the second tournament now, Team Liquid sends Fnatic packing. Bye-bye, one team from Europe gone. However, the other team would be G2 versus FlyQuest. G2, for the most part, considered the best team of the West out of both Europe and North America, going up against FlyQuest, who retooled. Even though FlyQuest was heavy underdogs, people weren't quite sure what to expect from them going into this series. Could they contend? We don't know. Game 1? Yeah. FlyQuest beat them. And it wasn't like it was this massive macro diff at level 1 either. It was FlyQuest winning significant hands check moments throughout the entire game. It came down to late game team fighting, of which Masu had an incredible Ezreal game. If you get a chance to watch the highlights, go back and watch how he was dancing around these fights, and quite honestly saved a few moments where G2 might have been able to close out the game a little bit earlier on, but they weren't, because he was able to poke them out. And FlyQuest goes on the win. It looks pretty damn good, if I do say so myself, despite Bwipo not playing all that well in game 1. Game 2, G2 bounced back, and they punished us topside. Bwipo and Inspired did not have the best game. Inspired pretty much played this entire series on scaling AP junglers, and can't say it worked all that well, in the grand scheme of things, but Bwipo was kind of the bigger problem, especially in game 2, where he definitely ran it down. It didn't feel like he really had anything going for him. Busio and Masu weren't able to have the same level of effectiveness because they went Senna Nautilus, which obviously is much more different than Ezreal, where Ezreal can kind of dance around these fights. Senna did some damage, but it really was on everybody else to carry, and unfortunately they didn't. So we get smacked game 2. Game 3, actually a really close game between both of them. There were moments where you thought FlyQuest would be able to win it, and then there wasn't, because in my opinion it was a pretty big draft diff. We picked blue side for FlyQuest, and then G2 had red side. They 5th picked Dr. Mundo, which countered our comp pretty hard, and we were pretty much on a timer. While Bwipo had some moments where he was able to go in and get kills, for the most part, we weren't really able to do something once Bwipo and Inspire kind of fed over a double kill to the Mundo, and yeah, it just fell apart, unfortunately. But we held it close. I mean, honestly, for like the best team in the West versus FlyQuest, who most people consider to be fairly weak, this was a very good showing for FlyQuest. And like just talking about their tournament as a whole, it was a pretty big step up from where we last saw them. My biggest worry for FlyQuest coming into summer was, okay, it looked like there were team issues well beyond everything else. They lost their strategic coach. They bring in Mithy. But it looks like they've turned it around a little bit. There's still clear issues with Blippo and Inspired not being on the same page at times. Inspired wanting to just AFK farm on AP champions and then become a monster late game, which by all means he had his moments where he did. But like it didn't work all that well in games 2 and 3. Standout performer, Masu, in my opinion. I think Masu played incredibly well, and this is like the second time now that we're seeing a younger North American player play pretty much up to the potential that we want to see from them. And to challenge the best team of the West, at least that was the perception coming into this, feels pretty good, if I'm being honest. I'm not upset by that. So that moves us on to the semifinal, where you have Team Liquid versus T1, G2 versus Top Esports. Rematch of Worlds, where G2 got the best of Top, and for Team Liquid, the chance to get revenge on T1, where we've never been able to take a series off of them. I don't think we've ever taken a game off of T1, ever. But there was no denying that like T1 were heavy favorites coming into this series. Nobody really thought that Team Liquid was going to be able to pull it out. Like, this was T1's series to lose by all accounts. And game 1 comes, and everything gets flipped on its head. Team Liquid won probably the most clean game we've ever seen from a North American team over an Asian team. Dead serious, including like 2019 and Invictus Gaming, including Cloud9 2018 over Afrika Freaks, and even their performances during the group stage. I mean, this game was just clinical in terms of the lane swaps that we did to try and get the Zeri ahead on Yon. APA played incredibly well on his Ziggs. It felt like every single time that he threw out an ultimate, it was like a massive moment, which is funny whenever you compare it back to what happened whenever Masu played Ziggs, game 3 of the FlyQuest G2 series, and he had like this open Ziggs ult in the middle of nowhere, which was just like, what? And then you see APA play it, and I'm willing to say, unanimously, APA is the best Ziggs player in the world. Not just the LCS, not just the West, the world, period. So we win our first ever game against T1 as North America, and immediately pandemonium sets in of like, oh my God, can this happen? Because there was this feeling that, you know, maybe they could do it, because like Team Liquid's been getting better and better and better, and like, could they close this one out? Could it happen? And then T1 drafts a 3 marksman comp against us, and we don't, like, there's a 5k goal difference at like 4 or 5 minutes. It was really bad. And T1 just goes on to stomp game 2. So it's like, okay, well, maybe game 1 was a fluke. Game 2, you know, maybe it was just T1 coming back. I think like the top comment on the Reddit thread was like Coma tightened the belt so hard that they weren't even allowed to buy IE. They had to play this on like Ultimate Bravery and still smash, otherwise they wouldn't be allowed to go home. So we go into game 3 and it's like, okay, well, will Team Liquid bounce back, or is this really going to be a T1 stomp? Like, what way are we going here? Which game was the fluke versus which one was not? And the truth of the matter was, it was a very close game 3. Team Liquid had a lot more in common with the first game, where they get a draft that's more in line. They get the Zeri. They get a, I think, was it Tristana mid or Corki mid? I think it was Tristana. And dude, we played it well. We had an Udyr on impact, or we had impact on Udyr, and it just felt like everything was going well. We like were able to make every right play through like the first like 15, 20 minutes. And it felt like we were building and building, but like we weren't as far ahead as we were in game 1. So there was this feeling of like, oh, like one bad thing could ruin it, but you gotta hold the faith, right? Then the Baron happened. Brother Umti. Oh man, forgot that he was playing for North America and went back to the Korean side of things. Oh, we threw the Baron in T1. Whenever they get Baron in a situation like that, they just close it out. So that's exactly what happened. They picked us apart, closed us out within the next 5 minutes, and unfortunately we would go on to lose. But it was like wholeheartedly, honestly, the closest that North America has ever played an Eastern team in the last like 4 years, I'd say. Like since, wow, it really has been since 2019 since we won a series against the East. But yeah, this was the closest that we've looked against them by far. And the best part about this was throughout this entire tournament, APA and Yon were probably the 2 best performing players from the West. Like without question. APA specifically looks like the best mid laner in the West, and we're still waiting to see if we can ever get that matchup between G2 and Team Liquid is both kind of contend for like this top of, or like best of the West title. But so the question also then became after, I was like, okay, well, does G2 win their series and rematch against Top and retain the title of best team in the West? No, they got smashed 2-0. It was not even close. Now, Top looks like they're on a whole different level, and when I'm recording this, finals hasn't happened yet, so I'm curious to see if anything like does come out of that, if T1's able to beat Top, or if Top does beat them pretty handily, then it does add validity back to like G2 still being the best team in the West. But overall, I think there's now an argument to be made that Team Liquid actually is the best team in the West, especially given the relative strength of like the number 2 teams from each region and how much closer Team Liquid and FlyQuest are and the challenges that they're able to push each other with, including Cloud9 in our region, who's conveniently sitting undefeated in the standings as well, versus Fnatic being the second best team from Europe and just looking like crap. Like looking bad. And it's building up this really intense rivalry between like TL and G2 of like, when will they finally meet? When will this finally happen? And APA just continuing to cement himself as one of the best mid laners in the West, period. Which is not a sentence that I don't think any of us a year ago when he subbed into the roster would have thought would have happened. Like, that's actually nuts to think where we are in 1 year's time. And it's a testament to Team Liquid's coaching, all of the Team Liquid players and everybody in that organization. Hey, kudos to them. They look freaking incredible and they're making us proud as a region. Now, to wrap all this up, does this Esports World Cup mean anything? Like, there's a whole debate because Gen G lost in the tournament. Is this part of the Golden Road? Obviously, it's not from a technical standpoint. I do think it adds a potential asterisk for me because if, say, Gen G wins the Golden Road, which I'm not convinced that they will, you'll look back and be like, man, but they really couldn't win a single, like the best of 3 there. I mean, people will write it off and obviously the Golden Road will count, but like in the back of my mind, it will always be there for me, whether people like that or not. Viewership for the event, I think this is the most viewed Team Liquid series ever. They nearly hit 1 million viewers, despite nobody knowing about this tournament really, and some people boycotting it as well. So overall, honestly, a really fun event. It sucks that blood money was involved. It sucks that, you know, a lot of people didn't know about it, but at the end of the day, there were some really good series in this event. It was fun to watch and gives credence to the fact that, yeah, I'm glad we're going to 3 international events next year. And I'm really curious to see how that first event next year works out with only 5 teams, because if this is like emblematic of anything, it's like there should be a minimum of 8 teams at every international event, in my opinion. Minimum, or like 10 since we're gonna have 5 regions total, or no, 4 regions total. I don't know. Regardless, it was fun. TL and FlyQuest walked home with a bag. It was a good experience watching. And if you didn't see it, hopefully you now know everything that you need to know going back into the summer split of the LCS, the LEC, and as we prep towards Worlds, because this kind of gave an inclination that, hey, maybe the West can compete come Worlds. I'm not saying win at all, but maybe we can cause some upsets. It'd be fun.